Around 3000 BC, a farmer in Mesopotamia walked into a temple owing barley. Not coins, not cash. Barley, grain, the actual crop, weighed out and handed over, because that's what the temple's ledger said he owed from the season before. Nobody in that transaction was thinking about money. There was no such thing yet. What they had was a debt, a scale, and a temple administrator writing the amount down on a clay tablet. And somehow, from that unglamorous arrangement, grain, debt, and a stubborn record-keeping problem, humans built the entire concept of currency. The idea that a piece of stuff, or eventually a piece of paper, or eventually a number on a screen, could represent value itself. So how did humans get from bartering goats for baskets to swiping a card? Start with the problem money actually solves, because that's the part most people never think about. Before money, trade ran on barter. You had extra fish, I had extra grain, we swapped. Simple when it works. But barter has a flaw economists call the double coincidence of wants. I need to want what you have, at the exact same moment you want what I have. If I've got fish and you've got shoes, and you don't currently need fish, we have no deal, even if we'd both benefit from trading eventually. Small communities could work around this through memory and trust. Everyone knew who owed what to whom, the way a small village keeps informal tabs. That system breaks the moment a community grows past a size where everyone can track everyone else's debts. Which is exactly what happened as Mesopotamian cities expanded. The temples were the first to formalize a solution, and it wasn't coins, it was grain and silver, tracked by weight, recorded on clay tablets, the same tablets that were independently giving rise to writing itself around the same period. A worker's wages, a farmer's debt, a merchant's payment, all of it got measured out in a standard unit called the shekel, originally a specific weight of barley, later a specific weight of silver. This is the part that surprises people. For well over 1,000 years, money in the ancient Near East wasn't a coin you carried in a pouch. It was a unit of account and a physical commodity, silver by weight, that existed mostly as entries on temple and palace ledgers. Most transactions were still recorded as debt, settled later, adjusted on tablets, the way a modern bank statement tracks numbers that rarely turn into physical cash changing hands. Elsewhere in the world, different cultures solved the same underlying problem with wildly different physical objects, and this is where it gets genuinely strange. In large parts of Africa, Asia, and Oceania, the cowrie shell, a small, glossy seashell from the Indian Ocean, became a currency that lasted, in some regions, for over 3,000 years. It worked precisely because it had properties good money needs. It was durable, hard to counterfeit, easy to count, and impossible to produce locally in most of the places that used it, which kept its supply naturally limited. In parts of the Pacific, giant carved stone discs called rye stones served as currency on the island of Yap, some of them too large to physically move, so ownership simply transferred by common knowledge of who owned which stone, without anyone touching it. In early China, small bronze objects shaped like knives and spades circulated as currency before true coinage, a physical echo of the barter tools they'd replaced. The leap to what most people would recognize as an actual coin happened around 600 BC in the Kingdom of Lydia, in what's now Western Turkey. Lydian metalworkers began minting standardized pieces of electrum, a naturally occurring gold-silver alloy, stamped with an official mark guaranteeing their weight and purity. That stamp was the real innovation. Silver and gold had been used as money for centuries already, but you had to weigh and test every piece in every transaction. A stamped coin let a buyer trust the value at a glance, backed by the authority of the state that issued it. The idea spread almost immediately, because it solved a problem every trading society shared. Greek city-states adopted mint within decades, each minting their own designs, turning coins into miniature advertisements for civic identity, owls for Athens, symbols of local gods and rulers elsewhere. The Persian Empire, controlling vast trade networks across the Near East, standardized coinage across territories it conquered, effectively forcing a shared monetary language onto an enormous, diverse empire. Rome took the idea further than anyone before it, using coinage not just for trade but as a tool of political messaging. Roman coins carried the faces of emperors, images of military victories, propaganda pressed directly into the metal that changed hands in every marketplace across the empire. A soldier stationed on the edge of the known world could hold a coin bearing the emperor's face and understand, without reading a word, whose authority stood behind the value in his palm. But coins, however useful, share a fundamental weakness. They're heavy, and there's only so much gold and silver in the ground. As trade networks stretched further, particularly along the Silk Road connecting China to the Mediterranean, merchants needed a way to move value across vast distances without hauling literal chests of metal. China solved this problem first, and with a strange kind of elegance. Merchants during the Tang dynasty began using paper certificates, promissory notes that represented a deposit of coins held safely elsewhere, redeemable on presentation. By the time of the Song dynasty, around 1000 AD, the government had taken over issuing these notes directly, creating the world's first true government-backed paper currency. A piece of paper, worth nothing as an object, became worth something because an authority guaranteed it could be exchanged for something real. This is, in a real sense, the exact same conceptual leap. Value doesn't have to live inside the object itself. It just has to be backed by trust in whoever's making the promise. Paper currency spread slowly outward from China, reaching the Islamic world and eventually Europe centuries later, arriving alongside the same trade routes that had once carried silk, gunpowder, and the alphabet. European banks in the following centuries built increasingly elaborate systems of paper notes, credit, and eventually national currencies backed by gold reserves. A system that persisted, in various forms, until the 20th century. Trace the whole arc back, and the story of money isn't really about metal or paper at all. It's about the same problem, solved over and over, by different people who never met. How do you get two strangers who don't fully trust each other to agree that something worthless in itself is worth something? Because everyone else agrees to believe it too. A Mesopotamian farmer's grain debt on a clay tablet, a cowrie shell traded across an ocean, a stamped coin from Lydia, a paper note from Tang Dynasty China. Every one of them is the same idea wearing a different disguise. The number on your banking app right now isn't so different from that farmer's barley debt 4,000 years ago. It's just trust, formatted a little differently.